I knew it was wrong, but I couldn't stop myself. Jennifer's voice trembles as she recounts the night that changed everything. Her innocent offer to massage her cousin Max took an unexpected turn, awakening feelings they both tried to ignore. As Jennifer's fingers worked out the knots in Max's back, she felt a shift in the atmosphere. The air grew thick with tension, and suddenly, every touch felt charged with electricity. What happens when family bonds clash with undeniable attraction? Jennifer's story will make you question everything you thought you knew about forbidden desire. As I entered the living room, I couldn't help but notice Max hunched over his laptop, his shoulders visibly tense from what I assumed was a long day of work. The sight of him struggling with discomfort stirred something inside me, a mix of concern and an unexpected urge to help. "Hey Max, you look pretty stressed," I said, trying to keep my voice casual. "How about a massage to help you relax?" The moment the words left my mouth, I felt a slight twinge of uncertainty. Max's eyes met mine, and for a brief second, an awkward silence hung in the air. His hesitation was palpable, and I could sense a hint of apprehension in his expression. Quickly, I sought to diffuse the tension. "It's just to help with your muscle pain," I explained, my tone reassuring. "I've picked up some techniques that might really help." Max seemed to consider my offer for a moment before reluctantly nodding. "I guess that could be nice," he said, his voice betraying a mix of relief and lingering uncertainty. As Max removed his shirt, I couldn't help but notice the defined muscles of his back. I pushed away the unexpected thoughts that began to form and focused on the task at hand. Positioning myself behind him, I placed my hands on his shoulders, feeling the knots of tension beneath my fingers. I began with gentle kneading motions, working my way across his upper back. The technique I recalled was particularly effective for alleviating muscle tightness. As I applied pressure to specific points, I could feel Max's muscles gradually starting to relax under my touch. Moving to circular motions, I concentrated on improving blood circulation in the affected areas. This, I knew, would help reduce any pain he might be experiencing. As I worked, I couldn't help but notice the warmth of his skin beneath my hands, the subtle shifts in his breathing as he began to unwind. Max let out a soft sigh of relief, and I felt a sense of satisfaction knowing that my efforts were helping him. The initial awkwardness seemed to dissipate as we both settled into a rhythm, my hands working steadily, his body responding to each movement. As the massage progressed, I found myself becoming increasingly aware of the physical connection between us. The act of touch, even in this innocent context, was creating an unexpected dynamic. I could feel a heightened sense of Max's presence, and I wondered if he was experiencing something similar. My focus began to shift from the technical aspects of the massage to the sensation of Max's skin beneath my fingertips. The texture, the warmth, it all seemed to take on a new significance. I tried to push these thoughts aside, reminding myself that this was just a simple act of helping a family member. Yet, as I continued, I couldn't ignore the subtle changes in the atmosphere. The room seemed to grow warmer, the air thicker. Each point of contact between my hands and Max's back felt charged with an energy I couldn't quite explain. I found myself noticing details I had never paid attention to before. The curve of his neck, the way his muscles flexed slightly with each breath. These observations stirred feelings that I knew I shouldn't be having, especially not towards my cousin. As the massage neared its end, I realized that something had shifted between us. The innocent offer to help had somehow transformed into a moment laden with unspoken tension. I could feel my heart racing, and I wondered if Max could sense the change as well. As my hands continued their work, an unfamiliar sensation began to build. The air in the room seemed to thicken, charged with an energy I couldn't explain. I found myself hyper-aware of every point of contact between my fingers and Max's skin, each touch sending a subtle shiver through my body. I tried to focus solely on the task at hand, reminding myself that this was just a massage to help my cousin relax. But as I worked my way down his back, I couldn't help but notice how my movements had become more deliberate, almost caressing. The defined muscles beneath my fingertips seemed to respond to my touch, tensing and relaxing in a rhythm that felt almost intimate. Suddenly, I became acutely aware of Max's breathing. It had changed, becoming slightly uneven. Was he experiencing discomfort, or was it something else? I found myself attuning to the sound, my own breath unconsciously syncing with his. A warmth began to spread through my body, starting from my hands and radiating outward. It was a sensation I'd never felt before, at least not in this context. My mind began to wander, despite my best efforts to stay focused. I thought about the way Max's muscles felt beneath my touch, the subtle shifts of his body as I worked out the knots of tension. It was becoming increasingly difficult to maintain a clinical detachment. Each press of my fingers, each stroke along his back, seemed to carry a weight of meaning I wasn't prepared for. Without warning, Max shifted slightly beneath my hands. The sudden movement caused my fingers to slip lower, grazing the small of his back. A jolt of electricity seemed to pass between us, and I quickly readjusted my position. But the brief moment of unexpected contact lingered in my mind, replaying itself over and over. As the massage continued, I found myself becoming increasingly aware of my own body's responses. My heart rate had picked up, and there was a faint trembling in my hands that I hoped Max couldn't detect. The room felt warmer than before, or was it just me? I tried to push these thoughts aside to focus on the therapeutic aspect of the massage, but it was becoming increasingly difficult. With a start, I realized that I was enjoying the contact far too much. This wasn't just about helping Max relax anymore. There was an undercurrent of something else, something that made my skin tingle and my breath catch in my throat. It was a mixture of excitement and apprehension, a feeling that we were teetering on the edge of something forbidden. The atmosphere in the room had subtly shifted. What had started as a simple offer to help had transformed into something far more complex. I could feel the change in the air, thick with unspoken tension and unexplored possibilities. It was as if we had crossed an invisible line and there was no going back. As my hands slowed their pace, every touch suddenly carried new meaning, loaded with possibility and danger. The invisible line we'd crossed was about to become a chasm, and I found myself teetering on the edge. My fingers traced patterns on Max's skin, each second stretching into eternity, pregnant with unspoken desires. The air in the room felt thick, almost suffocating, as I continued the massage. My movements became more deliberate, lingering longer than necessary on certain spots. I couldn't help but notice how Max's muscles tensed beneath my touch, a silent response to the changing dynamic between us. The rational part of my mind screamed at me to stop, to pull away and pretend this moment never happened. But another part, a part I hadn't known existed until now, urged me to continue. As I worked my way down Max's back, I noticed goosebumps forming on his skin. The sight sent a shiver through me, a physical manifestation of the electricity crackling between us. I found myself wondering if he could feel it too, this undeniable pull that seemed to defy all reason and societal norms. My hands hovered over his lower back, trembling slightly. I knew I should stop. This wasn't right. We were cousins, for heaven's sake. But the warmth of his skin and the intimacy of the moment clouded my judgment. I was lost in a haze of conflicting emotions, guilt and desire warring within me. Suddenly, Max exhaled deeply, the sound breaking the heavy silence that had fallen over the room. It was a sound filled with tension and something else, anticipation. The noise startled me, causing my heart to race even faster than it already was. I felt as though I was standing on the edge of a precipice, one small move away from falling into something I couldn't control. In that moment, I found myself face to face with a truth I had been desperately trying to ignore. The attraction between us was undeniable, a force that seemed to transcend familial bonds and societal expectations. It was as if we had entered a bubble where the outside world ceased to exist, and all that remained was this electric connection between us.
My mind raced, trying to make sense of what was happening. I thought about the psychology of internal conflict, how it often arises in situations where individuals feel a strong attraction to someone they believe they shouldn't. The guilt and confusion I felt were textbook examples of this struggle, but knowing the theory didn't make the reality any easier to handle. As I grappled with my inner turmoil, Max shifted slightly beneath my hands. The movement caused me to look up, and suddenly our eyes met. In that moment, a silent understanding passed between us. We both recognized the tension, the forbidden feelings that had taken root. There was no need for words. The electricity in the air spoke volumes. The moment stretched on, seemingly endless. What happened next would change everything, but was it a step too far? As Max began to shift beneath my hands, I felt a surge of panic mixed with an undeniable thrill. My fingers remained frozen on his lower back, suddenly hyper-aware of every point of contact between us. Slowly, Max turned to face me. Time seemed to slow as he moved, and I found myself unable to look away. Our faces were now mere inches apart, close enough that I could feel the warmth of his breath on my skin. I knew I should pull away, put distance between us, and shatter this dangerous moment. But my body refused to cooperate, rooted to the spot by an invisible force. The air around us crackled with an energy I'd never experienced before.
It was as if all the oxygen had been sucked out of the room, replaced by a heavy, electric charge that made every hair on my body stand on end. My heart pounded so loudly in my chest that I was certain Max could hear it. I watched, transfixed, as Max's hand slowly reached up towards my face. His fingers hovered for a moment, hesitant, before gently making contact with my cheek. The touch was feather-light, but it sent shockwaves through my entire body. In that instant, I felt my resolve begin to crumble. Years of family bonds, shared holidays, and the knowledge that this was forbidden began to blur and fade. The world outside this room ceased to exist. All that remained was Max, his touch, and the overwhelming pull between us. As our eyes locked, I saw my own inner turmoil reflected in Max's gaze. The conflict between desire and morality, between what we wanted and what we knew was right. But in that charged moment, the scales tipped irrevocably. Before I could process what was happening, Max leaned in, closing the last inch of space between us. Our lips met in a kiss that was equal parts passionate and forbidden. It was as if a dam had broken, releasing a flood of pent-up emotions and desires we'd both been desperately trying to suppress. The kiss deepened, and I found myself responding with a fervor that both thrilled and terrified me. My hands moved of their own accord, one tangling in Max's hair while the other gripped his shoulder, pulling him closer. The rational part of my brain screamed at me to stop, but it was drowned out by the roar of blood in my ears and the intoxicating sensation of Max's lips on mine. In that moment, I understood why people spoke of kisses that could make you forget your own name. This wasn't just a kiss. It was a seismic shift altering the very foundation of who I thought I was and what I was capable of. But as quickly as it had begun, reality came crashing back. We broke apart, both gasping for air, our chests heaving. The sudden absence of contact left me feeling bereft and cold. As I stared at Max, his lips slightly swollen and his eyes wide with a mix of desire and shock, the full weight of what we'd done began to settle over me. As the initial rush of passion faded, the weight of our actions crashed down upon me. I found myself questioning everything I thought I knew about family, love, and the boundaries that define them. The once solid ground of our familial bonds now felt like shifting sands beneath my feet. Our forbidden encounter had unleashed a torrent of conflicting emotions, desire intertwined with guilt, excitement overshadowed by shame. I couldn't shake the feeling that we had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed, altering the very fabric of our family dynamic. The future loomed before us, shrouded in uncertainty. How could we face our relatives, knowing the secret we now carried? Would this moment of weakness forever taint our interactions, creating an unbridgeable chasm between us and those we loved? As night gave way to dawn, one thing became crystal clear. Nothing would ever be the same again.